Welcome everyone to the webinar, the October webinar for the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. Today's topic is the outdoor recreation economy. And my name is Ryan Stewart. I'm facilitating today's panel discussion, and I'm speaking to you from the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island. I'd like to start by acknowledging that I live, work, and play on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Comox First Nation. Thanks for being here. We're recording this webinar, and we'll be sharing a recording with you later this week. Please stick around at the end to fill out a super short survey to help us plan future webinars and educational opportunities. Today's webinar will begin with a short introduction, followed by presentations by each of our 5 panelists. Then we'll spend the last portion with Q&A. We'll wrap up around 2:15. If you have any questions, please pop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen there. We'll wait until all the panelists have had a chance to speak before we'll be answering them just in that Q&A session. So who am I? My name is Ryan Stewart. Like I said, the outdoor recreation economy is a topic I'm really excited to be moderating because it's central to who I am and what I do. I've always been outdoorsy, hiking, mountain biking, surfing, fishing, climbing. Never tried an outdoor sport I didn't like. And that led to my to outdoor guiding and then freelance writing for magazines and websites, mostly in the outdoor space. For the last 20 years or so, I've been testing and reviewing outdoor gear, writing about biking and skiing adventures, and reporting on trends, issues, and happenings in the outdoor recreation world. I also write blog posts and features for the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC. The council represents more than 80 organizations in BC and their 100,000 members. It's an incredibly diverse group: hunters to bird watchers, mountain bikers and climbers, off-road vehicle users, snowmobile clubs. One of the things I've learned working with them is that they share a lot in common despite that diversity. The council is one of the only places giving the entire recreation community a unified voice with government and other stakeholders. Louise Pedersen and her team advocate for access and funding. They build capacity within the outdoor recreation community with resources and education and webinars like this one. As a nonprofit, they pay for all the work they do with grants, membership fees, and donations. You can learn more about the council, become a member, and donate at orcbc.ca. So after that bit of introduction, you may be wondering why an organization that mostly represents outdoor clubs and associations is talking about economic diversification and small businesses in the outdoor recreation economy. I think the story of Cumberland provides a good explanation. Cumberland is a small town near where I live, here on Vancouver Island. When I moved here to the Comox Valley in 2001, Cumberland was depressed. It was an old coal mining town. All the mines were shut. The logging industry wasn't doing very well. The main street was a couple rough bars and a bunch of boarded up businesses for the most part. Some banks in town wouldn't even give a mortgage to buy the houses in Cumberland, even though they were going for as little as $80,000 at the time. But it was already kind of the outdoor center for the area. It had some of the best mountain biking and the only rock climbing. It was also really cheap to live there. And so it attracted a lot of passionate climbers and skiers and mountain bikers, and they built more trails and they put in more climbs, and more and more people started to come and live there. Cafes, restaurants, small businesses started to open up to serve them. The trail community and the residents started raising money to buy and protect the forest around the village. The Mountain Bike Club negotiated one of the first access agreements with private timber companies. That allowed the village to market itself as a mountain biking destination. That attracted races and events that were invested back into the trails and the park, which meant more trails, more young families moving to town, more small businesses moving in. This cycle built upon itself. Today, Cumberland is home to more than 200 kilometers of trail. It is a well-known mountain biking and trail running destination. The access to the outdoors is a major draw, not just for tourists, but also for new residents. Its main street hums with life and economy. There are 3 bike shops in town, a paddling store, a company that only makes high-end mountain bike wheels, like $1,500 mountain bike wheels, just opened on the main street. And there's a high-end mountain bike company that's based there too. And the town hosts dozens of sporting events and all kinds of music and cultural festivals. For a long time in my writing and in my own kind of thoughts, I always thought of the kind of the outdoor gear world, the stewardship, the adventure tourism, things like access issues. Each one of these things in its own silo as its own sort of topic. But what I think Cumberland has shown me, and what I think you'll find after today's webinar, is that the outdoor recreation is an ecosystem, and it relies on all its different parts to thrive, each one building on the other. And I think we're only just beginning to realize the power and the potential of what that means. And I think it presents a lot of exciting opportunities. So with that, let me briefly introduce today's panelists who are going to be kind of filling in all the little bits and pieces in between what I just mentioned. So first, we've got Chris Perkins, the Vice President of Programs at the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. The organization promotes the growth of the nearly $1 billion outdoor economy in the US. He's in Jackson, Wyoming. John Hawkins is the executive lead for recreation strategy and service transformation for the Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change Strategy. Before taking on this 2-year project, he was the executive director of Rec Sites and Trails, and he's in Squamish. Wendy Koh is the regional manager for the Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation, which is also known as JEDI. She helps the ministry with rural economic development, and she is in Vancouver. Jojo Das is the development manager for the Sea to Sky Outdoor Adventure Recreation Enterprise. SOAR is a new nonprofit in Squamish focused on growing the outdoor economy. And actually, he's in Squamish. Matt Mosteller is the board chair for the Kootenay Outdoor Recreation Enterprise. CORE is an incubator for outdoor gear makers in the Kootenays. He's also really passionate about building a resilient outdoor economy, and he is in Kimberley. So I'm going to start with you, Chris. I'll have you begin the panel discussion. Can you tell us about what the outdoor recreation economy is and what you've learned about its power to drive economic activity?
Absolutely, Ryan. And thank you so much for having me, ORCBC. I may live in Wyoming now. I did grow up in Seattle and spent my winters coming up to BC. I had very fond memories of eating cinnamon rolls and getting lost on the backside of Silver Star Mountain. So if that resonates with any of your histories as well, let's connect offline. I actually truly love British Columbia and all the recreation opportunities that it provides. My hope today is to provide a lens into how this conversation has developed in the United States and hopefully provide some inspiration to guide the work that ORCBC and other associated organizations across the province take on to grow the recognition of the outdoor recreation economy. As Ryan mentioned, I'm with the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which fulfills a similar role as ORCBC in that we're a coalition of trade association across the full spectrum of recreation activities. So when you look at the logos here, you see hiking, biking, skiing, climbing, hunting, fishing, boating, angling, horseback, hospitality, RV, camping, motorized, you name it. And what that structure enables us to do is speak with a unified voice on behalf of the outdoor recreation economy publicly with elected officials and leaders. It also allows us to coordinate internally with various recreation interests and find that common ground on the 95% of things that all recreationists agree on. One of the first things I do every day when I start work is read the news. These headlines are from the United States, but they might feel familiar. Over the past 3 years, more emphasis and attention and investments in the outdoor recreation economy have happened than ever before. Across both sides of the aisle in the United States, in municipalities, both rural and urban, you're seeing policymakers invest in outdoor recreation infrastructure and access like never before. And my hope on today's call is to outline where that comes from, what motivates that, and how our organization has played a role. So the headlines here are addressing that intersection of outdoor recreation and economic development. And I'd argue that it comes down to this: outdoor recreation improves quality of life. I think we all knew that implicitly prior to the pandemic, but of course the pandemic illustrated that in new ways, both on a personal basis. I think each of us needed to get outdoors more than ever as a means to improve our physical and mental health and connect with loved ones in our communities, but also changed where we live and work. And you see more people moving to places, putting down roots as families in places that have great access to outdoor recreation infrastructure and access. I thought it might be useful to just back up and talk about how we define outdoor recreation, because that is actually core to the conversation here. Fortunately, we have a definition from the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is that outdoor recreation is any activity done for pleasure that occurs outdoors. So that can take place in a wide variety of locations, from here in the Grand Canyon, very far from cell service, in a very remote location, all the way here to an urban park in Connecticut in the United States, just 5 minutes from one's front door. Experiences like both of these provide those sort of fulfilling benefits that we receive from outdoor recreation. Now that we have that shared definition, it's helpful to talk about the sorts of organizations that contribute to the outdoor recreation economy, or the ecosystem that Ryan described. We can look at 3 sectors here. In the private sector, you have manufacturing, retail, services, tours, and guides and outfitters. In the public sector, you have community economic development groups, tribal nations, and local, state, and federal agencies. The nonprofit sector, community groups, Service Corps, and advocacy and trade associations. All of these organizations working in conjunction to help people have meaningful experiences for pleasure that occur outdoors. I also wanted to talk about how we came to measure the outdoor recreation economy, because that's an important part of the story. Prior to what's called the REC Act, we had industry-produced data from the Outdoor Industry Association, which is one of ORR's members. This economic impact data was impressive. It covered the whole industry. But there was always this lingering sentiment, which occurs in any industry, that when you present data that's produced by the industry, there can be a degree of skepticism. What are the assumptions you're working with? Don't you have an incentive to make these numbers appear larger? So there's a coordinated effort in 2016 under then President Obama to sign the REC Act, which established in the Department of Commerce, in the Bureau of Economic Analysis, a new account that would measure the size of the outdoor recreation economy every year. And this is how they broke that account down into core outdoor recreation goods and services and supporting outdoor recreation goods and services. So in core, you see things like gear and equipment, concessions, maintenance and repair, fees and fuel. In supporting, you see all the auxiliary benefits, economic, that come from outdoor recreation, travel and tourism, local trips, construction, and government expenditures. So let's look back at 2021, which is the most recent year that we got data from the US government about the value of this outdoor recreation economy. The numbers were staggering. It's an $862 billion industry, which accounts for almost 2% of US GDP, 4.5 million jobs, 3% of US employment. And importantly, when you look at the growth of that economy compared to the US economy as a whole, 18.9% compared to 5.7%, over 3 times that growth. And having these numbers at our disposal, I cannot emphasize enough how much that changed the conversation. To have both impressive numbers that cover the full diversity of recreation activities, but also numbers that were delivered by a perceived unbiased source, that is the US government, that changed the dialogue. It changed the sort of doors and rooms that we were being invited into to talk about the benefits and further opportunities for investment. And this map just shows state by state growth in the outdoor recreation economy. And on the state level, every year the account produces state level data, which can be a very helpful tool as well. So this is just arbitrarily looking at the state of Tennessee, where you can see that the outdoor rec economy in Tennessee grew almost 30% from 2020 to 2021. And it also enables a comparison between different recreational segments. So not only do we have national firepower to make the case to lawmakers, but now states, municipalities have that data to make the case, which has been really helpful as well. And just to unpack that 2020 to 2021 data further, this is not going to come as a surprise to those of you in BC who've seen this on the ground. Incredible growth across the outdoor recreation economy. And these numbers are adjusted for inflation, meaning that we're getting an accurate year-to-year comparison between 2019 and 2021. All these numbers are impressive, but particularly that climbing, hiking, and tent camping growth, nearly 40%. I think it kind of makes sense. It's an introductory activity into the outdoors. A lot of people for the first time getting outdoors and investing in goods and services, gear and apparel in that segment. I think the benefits of outdoor recreation from an economic perspective are well understood, but it never hurts to review them again. Things like increased tourism, new residents and businesses, increased income, revitalized main streets, new tax revenue, and importantly, healthcare savings. But what I think COVID has really illustrated is the recruitment and retention benefits from outdoor recreation. And I think this survey from the state of Utah illustrates this quite well. They surveyed tech sector workers who had left the state and were coming back. They said, you could go to any state to do your tech work. Why are you coming to Utah? And far and away, the most common answer selected, 85% of those surveyed said it was access to the outdoors. And number two was family. And I think that illustrates that when Utah invests in its outdoor recreation infrastructure and access, it's having these spillover benefits in industries outside outdoor recreation that help make the state more competitive. We've channeled this momentum into a number of federal programs. I'm not going to go into depth here, but we have a new federal interagency council on outdoor recreation. In the United States, you have several different agencies managing public lands and waters that are now coordinating in new ways. We have new investments from the U.S. Economic Development Administration through the American Rescue Plan. We have a new memorandum of understanding between the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rural Development, National Institutes of Food and Agriculture, and Forest Service. We have new legislation that's under consideration in U.S. Congress right now, where you have Democrats and Republicans coming together on outdoor recreation policy because they know about those economic benefits. And I'm sure those of you on this call know that U.S. Congress is not the most functional organization. And so to have two senators on both sides of the aisle coming to put this legislation forward and getting unanimous consent through committee is a huge deal. We're also seeing communities put outdoor recreation into their economic development strategies. So this is from the state of Michigan, where they talk about pursuing the development of an outdoor recreation economy through preservation-minded leveraging of the region's natural and man-made recreation resources. And further down, they talk about attracting skilled labor through provision of beautiful, amenity-rich and walkable communities. All this is really exciting to see. You're seeing local collaboratives form, not unlike the many that exist across British Columbia, I'm sure, where inspired local stakeholders from conservation groups, recreation activities, local land trusts, economic development organizations are coming together to talk about how they want to see their communities develop, knowing that outdoor recreation comes with a lot of attention and benefits, but also has some challenges in terms of affordability, in terms of stewardship of natural resources, and fears of overuse. So you're seeing local collaboratives come together with really diverse stakeholder representation to ensure that these economies develop with local benefit. Some contributions we've made to the effort are in rural development. So one of my first projects with the organization was to develop a rural economic development toolkit, where I interviewed around 60 practitioners from around the United States to talk about how these economies develop in such a way that they benefit everyone, not just a select few. I was really excited to see that ORCBC did a similar toolkit of its own, and I had the pleasure of speaking with Jimena, who put together that resource. And if you haven't seen it yet, it's a fantastic, comprehensive analysis of some of the challenges and opportunities facing British Columbia's outdoor recreation economy. In the United States, as is true in British Columbia, we also need to diversify both who goes outdoors and who works in the outdoor recreation workforce. Historically, it's been a predominantly white activity, predominantly for middle and upper class participants. And for outdoor recreation to be effective as a benefit to society, it has to benefit all Americans. And so one of our initiatives is Together Outdoors, which works on strategies to increase inclusion and belonging for participants of color, participants from underserved backgrounds, tribal communities, et cetera. And lastly, outdoor workforce development. As a fairly new industry that's just starting to coalesce and coordinate, we need a national outdoor workforce development strategy for outdoor recreation. And in the past year, we've done quite a bit of research that's captured in what's called ORR's Workforce Hub, which I'll put a link to in the chat. It includes an expert series where we interview professionals about different career paths in the outdoor workforce. Includes every single program related to advancement in the outdoor recreation economy, both colleges, universities, and trade schools, and also a roadmap for the outdoor recreation workforce captured in the white paper. And through that research, we've kind of identified three classes of outdoor recreation jobs, from technical specialists, that is, people who enjoy working with their hands, problem solving, don't mind being behind the scenes, public engagement roles, people who really like interpreting outdoor recreation experiences, get their energy from being around other people, and then integrators, people who have aspects of both of those categories in their roles. And so to have these definitions really helps us make the case to policymakers about the sort of jobs that will benefit from further investments in outdoor rec. And then another thing I work closely on is state offices of outdoor recreation. These are public sector offices that coordinate stakeholders in the outdoor rec economy. We now have 20 across the United States. And this has really helped catalyze state and local momentum around outdoor recreation access and economic development. It's been such a pleasure to speak with you all. I'm really looking forward to the Q&A. Again, I don't want to be prescriptive. This is just how we've done it in the United States, but I hope it provides some inspiration to you all. And I welcome your emails and questions later. Thanks so much, Ryan.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate that. And it's really exciting to see what you guys have managed to do down there by putting numbers to that data like that. It's inspiring and exciting. I'll turn next to John Hawkins. You've worked in the outdoor recreation world for more than 25 years. You live in Squamish. You've watched that town change from a real resource place to an outdoor juggernaut. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about what you've noticed, what you've seen the power of the outdoor recreation economy do to some of the rural places around BC and with your work.
Thanks, Ryan. Great to be here. And yeah, I definitely do have some reflections on that, Ryan. I mean, sorry, just sorting out my screen here so that I can see. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit about my reflections, as you said, having worked in this space and actually also living in Squamish, and we've seen a really dynamic shift in Squamish, and how I think that there's some lessons there that translate into some of the work that I'm doing, which I'll touch on really briefly around the current recreation strategy initiative in BC. I think that in my experience, when communities talk about outdoor recreation, much to sort of things you alluded to when you're talking about Cumberland, Ryan, they're looking at two things. They're looking at tourism. They're looking at also the ability to attract and retain residents. And it's out of that sort of attracting and retaining residents that we see an ecosystem of economics sort of coalesce around that when we start to create sort of economy and jobs and so on in the outdoor recreation sector. As you mentioned, I first came to Squamish in 1996. I came as a co-op student. I got a job during my university years as a land information management person in the Ministry of Forests. At the time, I actually didn't even know what the job was. I'm not sure exactly how I got it. I simply saw an opportunity to spend a summer climbing in Squamish. Ironically, though, that ended up defining the rest of my career, and it's climbing that I've actually left sort of behind to some degree. Sorry, just getting my screen here. So Squamish in 1996 was a pretty different place. It was an industrial town. It was a logging town. It certainly wasn't, on the map at the time in terms of an outdoor recreation place. But there definitely was a large group, or, well, I'm not going to say large, but there was a group of young people who were starting to settle in Squamish, who were there for the recreation opportunities. Obviously, it already had a storied climbing history with the chief. But it was really on the cusp of something new. And there were those of us that sort of came here in what, for us now seems like the early days, and really saw the opportunity. But it was a very different town. But for all that, the great recreation that was happening at the time, jobs were hard to come by back then. And after, I was doing a lot of work for the government, after what many will remember as the Corps Review in 2001, I left Squamish. I ended up in the United States working in U.S. national parks for a couple of years. And interestingly enough, after being down in the States for a few years and challenges with immigration and so on, and the choice arose to come back to Canada, and with no particular ties, there was a real question for myself and my young family about where do we go. There were a few options on the table. Calgary was an option, Squamish was an option, as well as a few other places. This was about 2006, and for anyone that remembers, that was right after the final closure of the wood fiber pulp mill in Squamish. And I remember talking to a couple of people that said, look, the last mill is closed in Squamish. It's pretty much the end. Don't even bother. I'm not sure what the future holds for Squamish, which, it seemed kind of ridiculous at the time. And in retrospect, we know that one thing Squamish hasn't been challenged with is attracting and retaining residents. interestingly enough, as I look out my window here, I'm looking at the latest Squamish development, and I just happened to catch an ad on my Facebook feed the other day. It's for the Mountain Village. Before the mountain, if you see this ad, if it's pumping on your Facebook feed like it is mine, and I'm sure it's hitting JoJo's, you'll notice that the first thing they show before the kitchen in this new sort of model homes is the fact that they've considered a gear room into the building, which I find is amazing. That's how places are being sold in Squamish. So Squamish obviously has a burgeoning outdoor recreation economy. It's got a huge tech industry. I really liked Chris's sort of discussion of the integrators and the technical side. I think that's very true in Squamish. We see it here. But Squamish is also, located halfway between the Vancouver airport and Whistler, and not every community can be sort of 45 minutes from 2.5 million people. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other communities in British Columbia. And specifically, I would like to talk for a minute about the sort of role that government and through my experience in recreation sites and trails has had in some of those communities. Some of the communities that come to mind for me are places like Revelstoke and Valemount, Burns Lake, Tumbler Ridge, Fernie. In almost every case, from my experience, these communities have had some core folks, some real leaders as the central catalyst to developing the recreation opportunity in those communities. These are people like Curtis Polyak in Valemount and Phil McIntyre Paul in the Shuswap, Kevin Dirksen in Burns Lake. And those are just some of the people that come to mind, but around those people, there were a huge number of really supportive community members and individuals that really drove these ideas in these communities. And that's how it started. And I mean, Squamish was no different. The mountain bike community had Cliff Miller, famed Test of Metal founder, who really drove things in that community. So those are the people, and we've seen that over and over again in British Columbia, who really make these community-centered recreation opportunities happen, from which an outdoor economy often coalesces around. But I also think that the government, for some degree, through recreation sites and trails, has been able to support and facilitate that. And that comes a little bit from the background and the place that recreation sites and trails came from. When recreation sites and trails was sort of recreated in 2006, it was in the Ministry of Tourism, Sport and the Arts. And that tourism focus has really played a foundational role in recreation sites and trails and the province's approach to supporting community-based recreation since. There were various iterations of the program through 2010 and 2011. Even in 2011, in the Ministry of Forest and Natural Resource Operations, rural development was such a key driver in that ministry. And in fact, in 2017, they changed the name of that ministry to clearly reflect the role that rural development played. And recreation sites and trails, was really tied in very closely with that group, which now we find in the JEDI, or the Jobs, Economic Diversification and Innovation Ministry, JEDI, which we have Wendy on the call today representing. And now we bring that branch brings that rural development, tourism ethos with them into the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change strategy. So I'm going to be really bold and suggest that there are 3 reasons that recreation sites and trails was successful in facilitating some of these recreation opportunities and helping some of these communities achieve success. Recreation sites and trails has always had a really community-centered approach. When you hear recreation officers, and many of you work with them and know them, talk about how they are doing their job, they'll often talk about they think about their areas, which often contain 3, 4, even 5 communities, but they'll talk about their areas in terms of communities. This is what, we did for Smithers, and this is what we did for Pemberton, and this is what we're doing now in Tumbler Ridge, and those sorts of things, rather than having sort of a landscaped focus. And I think that's been a really potentially overlooked, but really important part of the way that recreation sites and trails functions. It's that community-centered focus. The other thing that's been really fortunate about recreation sites and trails is the fact that it's had a very local approach to decision making and budget allocation. So recreation officers have been very able to react to the priorities of the communities, to understand and work within the communities, understand what the drivers are, and allowed that branch to help develop those unique and varied recreation opportunities in those communities. Because we know that those communities, what's going to work in Burns Lake is not the same thing that might work in Fort St. John or Kimberley or something like that. So, having a tourism and rural economic development focus, having a really community-centered approach, having an operating model that allows for this localized decision-making and budget allocation has no doubt, I think, had an effect and allowed recreation sites and trails to support those incredible community leaders in developing recreation opportunities. And I think that then becomes the catalyst under which, you know, we see rural economic development happen. So I think that's what it can look like. And I think that's what we find it does look like, even if you are a community that isn't 45 minutes from an international airport. So what does that mean? I think that in terms of the work that I'm leading now, and for those of you that don't know, I've got a 2-year project. We're 1 year into it, leading a recreation strategy and service transformation project within the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. There's sort of 2 aspects to that project. The first aspect is developing a shared vision, shared across multiple ministries. So not just environment and climate change, but also Ministry of Forests and JEDI and tourism and, you know, health, transportation. Huge number, you know, purposeful recreation vision. It's never actually happened in British Columbia, surprisingly. So that's a huge opportunity. And then secondly, to look at how we can transform the sector, and particularly the public service support for the sector to prepare ourselves for what outdoor recreation looks like in 2023. So some things that you know we need to keep in mind during that project is maintaining that community-centered approach, maintaining that ability to be responsive to community needs, and ensuring that rural economic development lens, which we've heard loud and clear through sector development we've been doing over the last few months, stays absolutely central to the work, in addition to maintaining a conservation stewardship lens and focusing also on Indigenous reconciliation. So some of the core focus for the project. So Ryan, I think I'll leave it there for now.
All right. Well, thanks, John. I think that's, I thought it was really interesting there, that idea that it starts with these people who are, you know, those community builders, the ones with all that energy and vision for what their community can be, and then working nicely with that community focus of the rec sites and trails and keeping that local kind of vision. I think that's a neat way of almost picturing that building out and where it can go. Because in my experience, that really is, there's always that builder, that person from at the bottom there, and then kind of grows up from this one person having this idea that, you know, it can be something else in a community or wherever they are. So
yeah, those people are the magic.
Yeah, they really are. I'm going to turn now to your colleague at the provincial government, Wendy Koh. The Ministry of Jobs, Economic Development and Innovation is deeply involved in promoting economic diversification. Can you tell us more about how the outdoor recreation economy fits into these efforts? And I'll start sharing that screen for you. Hold on one second.
Sure. Sure. Thank you, Ryan. And it's a pleasure to be here today. The lens that I'll be speaking from would, you know, coming from the economic ministry, would be from the outdoor rec tech sector. So before I start, I don't usually sound like this. I just caught a cold over the weekend and did not realize how bad it sounded until I woke up this morning. So I'll make my presentation a bit shorter than I had originally intended. And you're right, Ryan. Rural and regional economic diversification is an important component of what I do at JEDI and the work of the Regional Economic Operations Branch that I'm with. I'd like to first acknowledge that I'm joining you from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. So moving on to the next slide, I'll just give you a very quick type of an organizational overview of the Regional Economics Operations Branch, describing, you know, who we are and what the branch does. So we have 3 regional teams, a Vancouver Island and Sunshine Coast team, a Northern team, and a Southern team. And our branch, as you know, we do a lot of on-the-ground work to advance community-led economic priorities, or it could be sector development work, such as the outdoor rec tech sector. And at times we're also pathfinders by helping communities navigate and find appropriate funding programs. So if you just move on to the next slide, you'll see that there is a map with a number of photos there, and this is basically the group that represents REO. There are about 20 of us, and as you can see from the stars, we have staff located across British Columbia, mostly in rural communities. And, some of you may recognize some names and faces, or if you would like to be put in touch with your regional, manager after the presentation, please do send me an email and I can connect you to the individual. So let's just move on to the following slide. This slide speaks to the government's economic blueprint called the Stronger BC Economic Plan. It's really about building an inclusive, sustainable, and innovative economy for British Columbia. I won't go into too much details. Just really the takeaway is that there are two main goals: inclusive growth and clean growth, each of which comes with 3 pillars. And where REO branch supports the plan, as you'll see, it's in the middle top, building resilient communities pillar, where our priority is to work with rural communities to strengthen regional economic development, helping to diversify their economies and build economic resiliency. So let's just now go into the good part, which is the BC outdoor RegTech sector in the next slide. And so as we dive into what our RegTech sector is about. So, I'm so glad to kind of hear what John has talked about in terms of its tourism assets. Thanks to its natural wonders and, of course, strong ties to the tourism industry, BC is a world-renowned visitor destination and a tourism destination as well. And it is important as an amenity for attracting workforce and investment. So an aspect of outdoor recreation that here in Jedi that we've been working closely with stakeholders are the consumer products. So here I'm talking about tents, skis, backpacks, athletic apparel. So we really want to see the outdoor RegTech manufacturing sector as a segment of the broader outdoor recreation sector. So all throughout BC, including across rural regions, companies are manufacturing and designing products which are being sold globally, and they're creating local and regional diversified jobs. So although British Columbia has a history of producing and designing outdoor recreation equipment, or what we call outdoor RegTech, the sector is under-recognized as a standalone industry sector. And as Chris had pointed out on the extensive work that his organization is doing in terms of obtaining economic impact data on the US side, we look at them with envy for sure, because we recognize that little research exists today to understand or quantify the sector here in British Columbia. But we do know, having seen from the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, that it is a significant sector that is accounted for in the US current gross GDP. So what I've done is I've included a slide on the right, and that is a snapshot of the state of Montana's outdoor recreation economy. Let's move to the next slide, Brian, please. Thank you. So what we've done here in British Columbia is that really it's in an effort to understand more about the outdoor RegTech manufacturing sector. Jedi undertook a project to do a provincial scan and needs assessment of outdoor gear manufacturers and designers of British Columbia. So this took place early last year, and the objectives of the project were to create a database of existing companies in the outdoor RegTech space and to conduct selected interviews with companies to kind of suss out what the sector challenges, opportunities, and needs are. The research partners in this project were the Kootenay Outdoor Recreation Enterprise Core and Selkirk Innovates, which is the applied research and innovation arm for Selkirk College. And this project completed in spring of last year. Moving to the next slide, I can share with you just some very top line kind of findings and recommendations that came out from the report. So one key finding is that the outdoor RegTech industry is a very highly place-based type of a sector. And this is evidenced by the unique combinations of activities and amenities of each region. So for example, we have found that in the Kootenays, we are seeing snow sports and backcountry outdoor sport companies. In the Sea to Sky corridor, we are seeing water sports, wind sports, and climbing and mountain biking type of businesses. And on Vancouver Island and the coast, we're seeing surfing, mountain biking and paddle sports. And in the Northeast, we're seeing hunting and fishing outdoor companies. So just like to note that the ability for these companies to develop, to prototype, and test their products in the same environment that their consumers want to be in is highly appealing, right? It is fortuitous that we have such ideal testing grounds for these innovative companies that allows them to create high quality products that meets the needs and desires of local and international outdoor enthusiasts. So I have put two photos I just want to quickly touch on the right. So you'll see a photo with a tent, and that's a photo of Dan Durston. He's the owner of Durston Gear with his ultralight tent that he manufactures. And his company is based in Golden. The photo below that is a company called Ocean Rodeo, and they are makers of kiteboarding and windsurfing, and they're based out in Victoria. So one of the key recommendations from the project that we did, which was really to kind of help educate the ministry, because we didn't really have a lot of baseline data to begin with. So one of the key recommendations from that project was to identify and build new regional sector networks in regions that has a concentration of outdoor gear companies. So the Sea to Sky Outdoor Adventure Recreation Enterprise, SOAR, is an outcome from that recommendation, where JEDI worked with the local government, District of Squamish, the post-secondary public institution, Capilano University, and CORE to engage, businesses in the Sea to Sky corridor. And there was collaboration and ultimately helped to create SOAR. So I'm sure you'll hear more about SOAR and the work they're doing when Jojo presents. So next, I just want to touch a bit about what BC is looking, or in JEDI, maybe what we're looking to, how we're looking to support further growth in this outdoor RegTech sector. And we can move to the next slide, please. So one way is to identify funding sources. And I apologize, quite small, the text, but I just wanted to note, that there are existing funding sources to help communities and outdoor RegTech manufacturers. So here's just a selected list of funding programs, and I'll just highlight maybe three in particular. So the first one, right in the middle of the slide, you'll see Venture Acceleration Program. And this is a program that's administered by Innovate BC and a company called Northern Ultralight. This is a lightweight hiking gear company that designs and crafts outdoor products, backpacks, where they're based in Nelson in the Kootenays, and they were successful in obtaining funding from this program. And they've actually been featured as a success story in the Venture Partnership Program. So what we'd love to do is to help outdoor RegTech makers and businesses access such programs. Another example is the BC Regional Economic Trust, of which we have three in the province. We have the Economic Trust of the Southern Interior at CBC, we have NDIT in the north, and we have ICE-T on the island. And they're really a good way to access funding for region-specific economic development projects. So for example, at CBC has a program called Innovating and Advancing Key Sectors, and CORE was successful in receiving funding from at CBC for their projects. And finally, I'm sure this new funding program is something I love to highlight, and I think a lot of you guys know about it, is the Outdoor Recreation Fund. It's newly announced, and it will be administered by the Outdoor Recreation Council of British Columbia. It will be launched next year, and this is a new funding program to support community-based volunteer groups with improving access to outdoor recreation. So we can move now to the next slide that I'll just touch a bit on. It's the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program. This is a program that's currently open and being managed from JEDI. And this program funds local governments, Indigenous communities, and nonprofits to help strengthen your communities, build capacity, as well as diversify your rural communities in British Columbia. REDA, as we call it in short, it can play a significant role in supporting the development of a regional outdoor RegTech ecosystem, like CORE or SOAR, by providing financial resources in the form of grants that can be used for either research and development, which would fall under the planning stage. And you can use the funds to conduct engagement sessions, for example, to ensure that the RegTech ecosystem aligns with the values and priorities of your region. Or REDIP can be used for infrastructure development and startup support stage. And here, REDIP funding was allocated to CORE and SOAR previously to help get them started, to help facilitate opportunities for collaborations between RegTech startups, established companies, research institutions, and local governments. So we are currently in intake 2, where the deadline for application is October 31st, 2023. And finally, I'll just go right to slide 10. And this concludes my presentation on the BC outdoor RegTech sector. Here are my contact details. I think it doesn't hurt to emphasize that the outdoor RegTech manufacturing industry, as we all know, they play an important contributing role to local rural communities, and they positively impact the economy of British Columbia as an economic diversification initiative or as a way to foster rural economic resiliency and sustainability. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me or someone on the team, and we'd be happy to support you with some of your projects. I'll just stop here for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. I think we'll turn now to Jojo at SOAR there. The Sea to Sky region, it's definitely always been an epicenter for the outdoors and the outdoor economy. I know from some of the work I've done, Arc'teryx in particular being one of the biggest outdoor brands in BC, they talk a lot about their Coast Range backyard as being vital to their product development. They use it in their marketing to sort of push themselves as being that sort of high-end product developer. But I also know that they look at Vancouver as a key place for themselves because of its sewing talent in the community there. So, Jojo, obviously this is outdoor economy is a big part of that region. What were you trying to fulfill, or what are you trying to solve by with SOAR to help that community?
Thanks so much, Ryan. Hello, friends. My name is Jojo. My pronouns are he, his, and him, and I'm here representing SOAR on this webinar. I'm calling in from the traditional and unceded territories of the Squamish Nation. So I really appreciated the structure of the webinar because we've kind of started very, very large with Chris, and then we became from like industry overlay into BC specific, into regional specific with Wendy. And SOAR is one of the byproducts, as Wendy has alluded to, as kind of what this implementation of focusing on BC RegTech looks like. So hopefully I'll answer your question, Ryan, as we go through in what SOAR is trying to do and its overall mission and vision. As I said, my name is Jojo. I'm here as a development manager at SOAR. Before this call, all our panelists were having an opportunity to chat and talk about our respective experiences and like why we're so interested in the space. For me, I've kind of come into the outdoor industry and outdoor sector a little bit roundabout. All of this experiences I've had as a recreationalist, and now in my career, I very much started as an adult. Growing up, like I was born in East India, and I grew up in India and Canada and Indonesia and the Middle East. So access to outdoor recreation and outdoor space wasn't really something that was in the forefront or even encouraged for a variety of both cultural and economic reasons. But now these days I've been living in the Sea to Sky corridor for over a decade now, and it's very much changed not only my perspective and my interests, but also where my career has headed. And I think just anecdotally, it's been a really wonderful example of what Wendy was saying, in that a lot of these businesses and organizations have a strong connection to space and place and the people that they bring. A bit of context on how SOAR as an organization took flight. We are a brand new nonprofit based here in Squamish, British Columbia. This really started as Wendy and John was alluding to, is that this came from buy-in from the District of Squamish. So in 2020, we had the Emerging Sector Action Plan from the district, and they highlighted a couple key priorities for Squamish to continue developing its community and its economy One, unsurprisingly, being a focus on green energy and ecotourism. If you've ever been to Squamish, you can easily relate to why that was selected. It's objectively quite beautiful, and the access that has been built into recreation and the general outdoors is quite extensive. But the other focus has definitely been on focusing and continuing to develop the outdoor recreation industry here. So the goal that kind of came out of that emerging action plan was, how do we bolster the outdoor industry in the Sea to Sky? As Ryan alluded, there's been a lot of success stories in the region from a lot of very large companies these days, like Arc'teryx, like 7Mesh, or One Up Components, or G3 Skis, like brands we heard about, use their gear. And how do we encourage that to keep on happening? So the plan that came out of that was to create an on-the-ground organization that can directly work with emerging businesses to not only lower barriers to who is able to create and access resources to establish a business, but also accelerating their stages from ideation to actually prototyping and then manufacturing up to scale. So SOAR is a direct byproduct of REDIP. As Wendy mentioned, we got funding from REDIP earlier this year, and that very much gave us the seed money to get started. As you know, this region is also very expensive, so having REDIP as a resource was very helpful in order to get a physical space, to have programming up and running. And I'm very excited to say that we are officially launching at the end of this month on the 26th of October. So it's been very surreal going from a theoretical perspective to actually having programming up and running. So SOAR aims to be a development network for the Sea to Sky. And what I mean by that is a combination of a virtual space and a physical space for small to medium recreational technology businesses. And we're aiming to be the first formalized network for the outdoor industry in this region. Like, as has already been alluded to, this is a very rapidly growing space with a lot of businesses and supporting organizations in the area. When I say region here, I'm talking about West Vancouver up to Pemberton, which includes Squamish and Whistler. So from our own surveys and also some of the research done by Selkirk and Core, we've identified around 380 firms that fall under the umbrella of recreation technology, and this includes adventure-based media, technical gear and apparel design, advanced manufacturing, and it supports over 800 high-paying jobs in this region. So the goal of SOAR is, how do we keep on supporting and bolstering that such that this continued success keeps on happening, and we're bringing in talented and curious individuals here that we can continue bolstering the economic impact right here in Squamish and the Sea to Sky region in general. And the way we're doing this is kind of structured over our three main goals, which is meet, make, and advocate. So our game plan here with SOAR is separating up into two main categories. One, which being is very targeted programming, and the other is our physical innovation center. So the programming piece is highlighting and understanding some of the main gaps we've seen in small to medium businesses, and what are the common missteps, or what are the common gaps in knowledge that are preventing people and businesses to scale and become successful. And a lot of this can really be addressed by knowledge sharing, by having the correct people to connect to, ask questions, by allowing one mistake in learning not be repeated by another business that's going down a similar pipeline. And the other is actually having physical real estate and physical tools to access and in order to design and prototype. Space is very much at a premium in the Sea to Sky. Squamish is no exception. So having a place where businesses can come and utilize the machinery to actually take their ideas from their computer screen and bring it into reality is definitely something that we've identified as a measure to accelerate this step. And thankfully, we've been able to get started because of REDIP and the funding we received. Now, Basecamp, as we call it, very tongue-in-cheek, is very much we're always growing. So what we're launching with at the end of the month is a very small set of tools. We have a pretty moderately sized CNC. We have a high wattage CO2 laser and 3D printers and co-working spaces. And acknowledging that this is not currently the best fit for everyone, but it is a place to start as a way to be demonstrable with the funding we get, and in order for us to leverage more partners in the future to keep on growing. The goal of SOAR is to connect with businesses that we can very much lean on and help grow, but also learn alongside, because we are very much a member-driven nonprofit and very much learning from the members we have and being adaptable and flexible to what they need. So very much trying to grow alongside, and by no means is this a finished product. With the general theme of that there's more than one route up the wall, knowing that no single business is the same as the other, that flexibility piece and that adaptability piece is very important. As Wendy mentioned, a lot of these businesses are space and place located. So knowing that a textile-based company and a hard goods-based company is going to have different needs and different wants. So hence targeting SOAR's members through that two-prong approach of having a physical innovation space whilst also having programming that can be more adaptable. And very much being rooted right here in Squamish. The people in place component is very pivotal. There's a large reason why people choose to come live here, is to have that access to outdoor rec, and just having that facilitation that this geography entails. And it's very much a testament to all the work that's put behind not only maintaining and building new trails, but also the different organizations that have been started here due to the demonstrable needs that have been expressed. I think Chris touched upon this, but this has become a very large importance and goal in my own career, is how do we create more inclusive spaces for outdoor recreation and also outdoor industry. The last 5 years, I've been running a variety of nonprofits that focus on increasing inclusion in these spaces, one of them being Mountain Mentors, and essentially changing who's holding knowledge in outdoor recreation. Like historically, these spaces have very much been very privileged places to be, not only from geographical, but also from a resource space perspective, and shifting who's holding that knowledge. And that comes with very much working with people on a one-to-one basis and allowing these resources to be accessed by a greater diaspora that is more reflective of where we live, rather than what has historically just been true. So a large part of SOAR is being able to provide that programming and that training to say, let's say someone wants to come in and be like, I don't know how to use a CNC machine. Like, great, I can tie you in with a technician. I can have courses constructed to let that happen. And the whole idea behind making these objectively quite high barrier, high resource intensive possibilities and increase the greater denominator to who this is accessible to. So this is the overall goal and aim. Fully acknowledging that SOAR is just getting started. Currently, we have a working board of directors, and then who's volunteer, and then just me. So I am just one human who's trying to do as much as possible. And so there's going to be progress. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be learnings. So I hope that you'll join us and you'll stay in touch. Our physical location is right in the center of Squamish, in Industrial Way. Our website launched last week, so soar.org is a great way to learn a little bit more about us, to have a little more context and depth to what you're doing. And please email me. I'd love to hear your questions and comments and feedback. Again, this is very much a member-driven network, and currently it's just my brain. So if I take a little bit of time to get back to you, it's because it's just me. But thank you so much, and I'll pass this back off to Ryan.
Thanks, Jojo. The goal of SOAR is similar to what the Kootenay Outdoor Recreation Enterprise has been doing in the Kootenays for a few years. So we'll turn to Matt now, who's been involved since the beginning of CORE. Beyond the economic opportunities, Matt, I know you think there are bigger issues at stake with the outdoor recreation economy. Maybe you can start by telling us a bit about CORE and then share your vision. Matt, we can't hear you if you're talking.
There we go.
Yep.
Can you hear my, or can you see my screen, Ryan, now?
We can see your screen. Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, just to step back.
You want to click on the slideshow button towards the top with the
Oh,
arrow.
yeah. Thank you very much, Chris.
Got it.
You know what? I'm a flake. Not that's my industry, not the tech side of it. So as I do come from the skiing and passionate skiing background, I wanted to share with a little bit more about, I think the way this is set up is, we've got to go quick here because I'd like to have a lot of the time for the Q&A, because that's the real important part of this. But just a little bit of background. CORE is a rural economic development incubator, and we are all about craft gear makers. Whoop. Okay, there we are. Wait a second, that's a really sensitive mouse. So we are CORE. We started with about 3 years ago, and we're over 100. And we make everything in the Kootenays, gear made right here on the homeland of the Ktunaxa people. And it's a makeup of skis, bikes, fly gear, canoe, paddle, you name it, rock climbing. All of our, like Wendy shared, Dan Durston, tents, backpacks. We've got all kinds of collective of different gear being made right here. And hopefully if I touch this thing, it won't pop too far forward. Really important pillars for us is to scale and advance the outdoor rec tech sector. Really what we're all about is we're a rural economic development incubator. Our focus is on the first two, is also to economic diversity and community investment. And for our attraction and relocation strategies, more about awareness, and then we have sustainability with the CORE Rehab and other projects. I'm going to talk about each of those in a second here for you real quick. So Kootenay approved is the attraction. It's about all of it puts the brand of our gear being made in the Kootenays. It's authentic. It's tested in the wild landscapes of the Kootenays. See the background in my picture of the mountains, the rivers, the lakes. The wild landscapes inspire our makers to create incredible outdoor gear right here. On the launch of the Kootenay approved, it's gear made here, tested here, and shredded here. And this will launch at the Banff Mountain Film Festival, where we're showcasing and featuring the 100 plus gear makers that we have in our collective. We're really excited about this. It puts the gear on the world stage, and this is one of the things that's really important to us as well. And when we move down to the next part, I'll just touch on the other aspect that's really important to our makers. It's and we host the summit, and the summit is focused on really about the sustainability and circularity of the industry. So I'm going to move to that part right here, if I can get back to it. Okay, so this is a pilot for outdoor gear circularity. It's coming up next for us. And this is really something that I think is, CORE has been on the leading edge. We're the first outdoor recreation rural economic development incubator in British Columbia and in Canada. And one of our pillars was to start a summit, which we hosted last year. And with that summit, we wanted to look at what in the outdoor rec tech space, what are the next steps? What's happening next? What's most important to our members and to the industry? So we're really piloting ahead with sustainability and circularity. And one of the projects we're working on is a rehab, which, not, as we all know, the issue for the outdoor gear industry is also filling up the landfills with all this gear. So we're looking at where can we take this gear next. So one thing is to create a hub in the Kootenays that we can repair, that we can resell, reuse, repurpose, recycle gear. So it'll be a hub where people and industry manufacturers, we can work collectively together to take care of and solve some of these issues. And this is what we are working on as a next step, and what we think is really vital for the industry ahead. I want to touch on one of the other things that we also host. So we host the CORE Summit, first in Canada. This year, I think it's really important to note that I think we were all blown away with last year's event, but this year's speaker and the level of knowledge shared and the thought leaders, really important parts for us is the collaborative approach, bringing all of the outdoor gear makers together, bringing the thought leaders from across Canada and US, And it was really exciting that we had Phil Shellhammer, who is from the Incubation Office of Entrepreneurship at the Innovation Center that's funded by Sam Walton at the University of Arkansas. And one thing that Phil really shared with us is that the power of this collective group and the innovation and passion. And I think, like John noted and Ryan noted, it starts with these passionate individuals, and it starts with bringing those passionate individuals together and creating that community for them, and then creating opportunities for education and shared knowledge amongst the group. And what we found out of that is that we really have something really powerful going in the Kootenays with CORE. And Phil recognized that with his comparison to what they've been able to do in Bentonville, Arkansas, and what the Walton family has done in creating a healthy lifestyle community anchored by the outdoor recreation economy, and how that changed the landscape for Bentonville, Arkansas. And as was noted, that it became not only the attraction part, not only the economic development part, but also the healthy living part. And I think that's a critical piece, which they were able to offset a significant cost of healthcare because of their investment in the outdoor recreation economy. And one of the other things I noted that I think is really important that we have to also focus on is the climate-friendly aspect of the outdoor rec economy. We in these small towns in the Kootenays, many of the towns were as John noted in his presentation, reliant on the resource sector and the ups and downs of that cycle of that industry. And we are going to see change as in the current government and our need for climate forward thinking. And the outdoor rec economy does provide a much more climate friendly option, a much more healthy option, and jobs for both rural and economic regions of our province. So I just wanted to cruise real quickly through, and I'll end with that so we can get to the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Now, before we go on though, Matt, I want you to, we had a conversation the other day and you had a really interesting vision for the importance of the outdoor recreation economy and where and what's at stake if we don't sort of establish, put some groundwork in now. Can you kind of touch on that briefly? Just, that bigger vision for the health and wellness of society with
Well, I think, and apologize for speeding quickly through my presentation so that we could actually come to this discussion part. I really think we are at a turning point. We're at the cliff, so to speak, in the outdoor world. And we do need a collaborative, community-developed, provincially wide strategy in the outdoor recreation economy. And we need this, if not for the reason of fighting the massive health crisis, we need it, if not for the reason of what are we handing off to our next generation, and we need it because this also provides us these communities, the powerful outdoors, but it provides rural economies and urban economies a diversity in their economic development that isn't really being looked at in today's in the province of BC today.
Thank you. Okay, so let's open this up to the full Q&A. I think I'll start, maybe Chris or Wendy, you can help with this one. A few people have been wondering how they can capture the impact of their local outdoor recreation economy. So, they've used examples of an equestrian trail or like a non-motorized trail or a campground. How do they show what the economic value can be of something like that? How do they find that data without it being too onerous of hiring an economist or something like that? Do you guys have anything you can input?
Well, so without hiring an economist, you can look at more publicly available data. You could extrapolate by saying we have 10,000 cars coming through our community every day. Let's say 10% of those people might enjoy recreating on a daily basis. Let's say each person would spend $40. There you have a very crude estimate, but you can start to source that from existing observations. You can also pull sources like Strava or AllTrails or ways that people are recording their recreation activities, even Instagram. to show how people are using. But a next step up would be doing an input-output analysis from an economist. And then I think there's a play to be made across Canada to advocate for some legislation like the outdoor recreation satellite account that we have in the United States.
Wendy, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple quick thoughts. Thanks, Chris. Great insights over there. I would also include, for example, what the District of Squamish has done, which was they developed a sector profile, one pager, and that's online. You can find that very quickly when you Google, and so it captures kind of data on like the number of local businesses involved. I think Jojo mentioned it. I think I saw it on John's slides as well. And so I think it's just a quick kind of way to construct some quantitative data as a start for your local community or for your local organization. And then, of course, outside of hiring an economist, doing input and output models, surveys and questionnaires among local businesses, outdoor enthusiasts. It's a kind of a great, to Chris' point, kind of a polling mechanism to kind of gather data on spending that's related to outdoor recreation, or on accommodations or food and other relevant categories. I think it's a good start, of course. It's for some groups that are interested. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Another one that a few people have been asking, maybe Matt and Jojo, you can weigh on this. What are the big needs you're hearing from small gear makers that they try to establish themselves? What can communities do to maybe encourage or support these businesses that might be in their communities, but they might not even know about them or kind of hidden in behind?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ryan. I think one of the most useful things, and I think this was very much demonstrated by CORE's conference last week in Kimberley, was just even those soft connection pieces between the businesses and makers. I think one of the common missteps is people end up working in silos, and it's very easy to feel like you're in tunnel vision and you're the only person doing this one thing, when in reality, there's probably other people who are targeting similar problems, similar solutions. And I think one of the most tangible and thankfully one of the easiest things to do is just pull people into the same space. And again, having a formalized network that people can meet each other, ask questions, access resources. I think bringing people together as a social species is something that is not that difficult to do, but the benefits are quite disproportionate to the effort put in. So I think even the connections I was able to make at CORE last week and with CORE members and also the businesses, you'd be like, oh, like I'm also working on this, or I also have this question, or you should meet this human. I think they'd be a good fit for your next board of directors position. I'm like, this is amazing. I think bringing in like-minded humans into a space where there is facilitated discussion and then there's a general direction, I think that's something that is very achievable, even on like an individual basis. And even something that's SOAR, while we're just getting started, are things that we can actually actuate and deliver upon. I think something that becomes more complicated and more resource intensive is then actually bringing physical tools and actual accessible education into these spaces, because like we've demonstrated in so many different ways, the outdoor industry, both in recreation and in development, are objectively quite high barrier for a variety of reasons. And there's different ways to target this. One of them is connecting people with the correct resources and humans, but also providing the financial resources, which is something that Wendy and John were speaking to, but also the physical tooling, which is something that I know that SOAR is trying to do, what CORE is trying to do with their rehab, and just giving more tools to creators and businesses.
And I'll just add, attend the CORE Summit. It's a great resource, and all of the government, like Wendy noted, Community Futures at CBC, there's tons of different programs, Export Navigator. But if you attend the summit, you usually get everybody in the same room together and you can meet with all of them. It happens every year in October.
Great. Quickly, First Nations, Indigenous people that want to get involved, is there anything out there that's dedicated towards them or towards opportunities in that sphere? Maybe Wendy or John might be able to weigh in on that?
What I can tell you, Ryan, and this is a learning that's recent for me through the work we're doing around the recreation strategies, actually the number of Indigenous specific outdoor recreation organizations, Indigenous women who climb, Indigenous women outdoors. We're actually doing some work on our end to pull some of those groups together and to have to actually begin some of those discussions. As far as I know, there isn't a central organizing body for that, but I think that that raises a really good point, and certainly a part of the conversation that we need to have that hasn't been had yet.
All right, we're getting
Ryan. We have
Yeah.
Indigenous makers in core as well, too. Just to highlight that.
all right.
Thank you, Matt. I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah. So
It's
more.
They're a small group, but where we can to support, be it at core or store. I mean, I think it's important to actively kind of reach out Indigenous businesses that are in the outdoor rec tech space.
Yeah, they were the first craft gear makers.
Nice. Well, we're almost out of time, so I think we should wrap this up. I thought maybe to end, just get each of you on the panel there to quickly just give us your vision for the outdoor economy in BC and what needs to be done to ensure, it's vibrant and sustainable, say in 5, 10, 15, 20 years time. Matt, since you're still up there, why don't you jump in first?
Yeah, I think what has been shared across everybody's presentations is the community, the passion, the opportunity that we have this already happening in our province, and bringing everybody together collectively and creating good dialogue and creating a strategy from that. I think we can create, my goal and my thoughts would be North America's leading outdoor recreation economy, not only tying in every aspect of what we've talked about, from the Indigenous, from the environment, the stewardship, the sustainability, the circularity, not just the gear making, but every aspect. We should, if a person driving for a camping trip in this province, they should be going, my gosh, this is better than any other place in North America.
Jojo, you want to go next?
Totally. I think my vision 10, 15, 20 year, I think really focuses on the term sustainability, but not just from a resource perspective, but also how industry is affecting where people live and work and the accessibility to those spaces. I think Chris outlined this very well, in that once there is support from a regional government and federal government perspective to collect data, it really opens up people's perspectives and eyeballs, like, oh, this is actually something that's quite impactful. And then policy can actually be based in those facts. I think something that is a direct consequence of a rapidly growing outdoor industry is population growth in these spaces, and how people are all wanting to come and live. And that creates their own very specific pain points there. So I think sustainability on, yes, there's a lot of excitement and there's a lot of motivation and push to grow in this industry, but also, again, not working in a silo. Like, all of this is very much connected. One of the main talking points that us panelists were given is, like, how do we connect space and place and people? And that will never go away. If people are getting excited to develop businesses because they live here, we also have to look at that sustainability piece and allowing people to live here in a sustainable way.
Nice. Wendy?
Sure. So I think all of us have very similar type of a collective vision here. So for sure, I think in the coming decades, I would love to envision a thriving and sustainable outdoor economy in British Columbia. I'll be forced to say I don't have all the answers, but as we all know, as the outdoor recreation economy evolves, Jedi's roles will need to evolve to kind of ensure that we keep pace with industry's changing dynamics. And importantly, I would see one that embraces growth, inclusivity, and balanced coexistence with our natural environment. And ultimately, I think, like I said, it's a collective vision that represents, a future for British Columbia that celebrates our natural beauty of our regions, but also, nurtures our technological innovation and our economic development, especially for rural and regional communities.
Great. John?
Great, thanks, Ryan. Well, I think it's inarguable that BC has incredible natural capital that rivals any in the world. But I think what we really have, our real advantage, is the community capital, that human capital. And the Matt's discussion of Bentonville shows just how powerful that can be. And so I think what is incredibly important for British Columbia, and what I particularly see as government's role, that's the perspective I bring, is facilitating and really capitalizing on that human capital, and that has to be part of the story going forward. And that comes from supporting the communities.
Nice. And then maybe Chris, there you can wrap up just like from an outside perspective, from all the experience you have looking at all these places across the US. I mean, what do you see that BC needs to do here to realize that vision that everybody here seems to share?
I was just going to say that I was struck on this call by how well the conversation's already evolved, like the sorts of organizations that exist, the problems you're identifying, the people you're bringing together. Like, I don't want to claim to have a solution that you're not already looking at. It just takes time. What I would consider incorporating is that outdoor recreation for many, if not most, is what occurs right outside their front door. And what makes livable places is having walkable communities with active transportation networks. After this call, I'm going to shut the computer and go for a run at my front door, because there's a lot of trees and natural vistas, and not to forget about that. It's not just the places that are 2 hours away, it's also what happens right out the front door.
Yeah, that's so true. It is the most accessible, and it's the one we use the most in general, right? So even those of us that do a lot to get out. So I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us. Remember, we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar, and links and contact information for everybody involved in that we talked about today. It'll come out later this week. It's part of a monthly series of webinars that the Outdoor Recreation Council of BC puts on. November's topic is on stewardship. The best way to stay on top of when the webinars are and the topics and sign up and all that sort of stuff is by subscribing to the newsletter. And you can do that on the website at orcbc.ca. Again, please don't hang up right away. There's going to be a quick survey, just like literally a couple questions coming right at you as soon as we close this up. So thanks again. Thanks to all the panelists. Really appreciate you taking the time and the energy to come and chat with us and share everything. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Ryan.
Louise.